How can HR create products and services that people love and actually want to use? The design of workplace solutions is often based on HR perspective and heavily influenced by existing policies and processes. Instead, we want HR to understand the experience of work and start to build solutions based on the needs of their people. This is why design thinking is now an essential HR skill. Welcome to Talking HR Trends with Natal and Tom. I'm Natal Dank.
And I'm Tom Haak.
And we explore the latest hot topics and business challenges impacting the people side of organisations. Stick around to the end for our practical top tip. And if you find this discussion valuable, please subscribe.
So, Natal, what are the key messages out of this episode for you?
That design thinking helps you co-create the employee experience, and it's very powerful. So, Tom, what are the key messages for you?
Design thinking is fun.
So, Tom, in previous episodes, we've explored the need for HR to start to truly understand the employee experience and build more holistic solutions, and in particular, start to study and understand moments that matter. We've also mentioned design thinking as a key kind of tool that people can use to achieve these outcomes. But we haven't really dedicated a whole episode to that topic and spent time to sort of help HR professionals get comfortable with how to use design thinking. So I thought that we could do that today. So can you help the HR professionals listening today? What is design thinking? What does it kind of look like? What are the key components?
And for me, the essence of design thinking is working on real problems close to the people who are going to use our services, products, whatever we design. And the traditional design thinking, and I've made a chart, it has 5 phases. And it starts probably with the most important one, and my English is not, but it's emphasize. Is that
Empathize.
Really getting close to the people and trying to understand not only what their issue is, but also, how are they behaving and what is their view, which is not often easy. Because we jump to conclusions or we say, okay, we understand what the problem is, instead of really talking to the people. For example, onboarding. You want to improve your onboarding experience. Well, maybe it's a good start to talk to the people who are going to be onboarded, right? Instead of saying, oh, we know what new people need. So empathize. Number 2 is define. It's called the define phase. That's more, how do we really frame the issue, the problem? What do we want to solve? Going from broad and then distilling the issue, the problem, the what you want to solve. Then, if you have well defined that, and probably hopefully not too big, it's not increase engagement of employees. I think that's probably too broad. Motivate people. Yeah, we're laughing, but often we phrase things very big.
Yes, we do. And it's about, with the define step, it's generally about putting it into the perspective of the user. So after we've empathized and we've gathered the problems and the needs, now how does it look like through their perspective? And we often use the statement, how might we? So how might we make opportunities more available or easy to find in an organization? This kind of thing, yeah.
Then ideate. And you could say that's also brainstorming. What could we do? What are possible solutions to work on this? So that's again going broad. Of course, that also results in making a selection. This looks most promising. And then you go to prototyping. So, well, maybe we can build a prototype or design a prototype to go back to our users, clients, to say, well, is this something that might help or you had in mind? It's a prototype, so it's not a finished product. It might not totally work, or it might just be a sketch. But speed is important here, because if you spend weeks in designing something and then go to your client and they say, well, no, it doesn't remotely look like something we could use, then you have lost all the time. So prototyping, and we know that, well, if you're a perfectionist, people don't like it. They say, oh yeah, but it's not working. It's not really working. Yeah. Well,
No, definitely. I find a lot of HR teams they feel quite vulnerable about showing their prototype because a prototype can be, it could just be things on a cardboard cutout that you
yeah,
show to people, but you use it in a way to test whether this idea is actually going to solve their problem and it's worth the investment
yeah,
of the project and the time and the money that you're then going to spend on it. So actually, you want a few prototypes that you quickly test to find out which one is the right one or which one works and which one doesn't. And we shouldn't, it's okay if some of the test
yeah.
fails. That's fine. Yeah.
The last phase is the testing. Eh?
Yes.
Prototype and that tested. I included it in one phase, but in the end, it's about testing, and it's an iterative process, of course. So
It is. Yeah.
you might have different prototypes. You might go back to the drawing board and say, well, if we change this and do this a little bit different, and then test it again. So it's not revolutionary, but it helps to go through the process in a speedy way, working close to or sometimes in co-creation. It's also about co-creating with your users, clients. Don't keep them at a distance, involve them quickly.
Exactly. And I think the word co creation is just so key here. It's how do you not just understand the true experience of work, which is that empathize step and that define step, but then by prototyping and testing, you're testing with real users straight away, and their feedback directly impacts the design of the solution. And that's so powerful. And you're right, it's really good to call out that test step separately because that's about setting your hypotheses. Okay, what are we going to, what data do we need to know that this is the right thing to now move into project
Yeah,
stage? And what data do we need to collect and how would we do that? So it's more of a scientific approach as well for HR. It's more evidence based, which I think is really good.
and it's fun.
And it's fun, exactly. Yeah, totally. I actually find that this approach often energizes teams I work with, which is great. Yeah.
It doesn't have to take weeks. Sometimes companies organize hackathons, or some. I think it's called hackathons. Yeah, they say, let's spend 2 days or one day with a group of people, multidisciplinary people, and then we can very quickly come to tangible results a lot quicker than we are used to.
Yeah, no, I've done design sprints in one day, sometimes a few hours, and the 5-day design
Yeah,
sprint, which is actually a basis of a book called Sprint by people that used to work at Google. That's a great format, and I see a lot of HR teams using that, and it works very effectively, and you get an outcome, which I think is what is so exciting. Yeah. So let's talk about a few case studies,
yeah,
Tom, to bring this to life for people. And one of the best I know is a HR team at a really big organization, and they were doing lots of management development programs. And there was the classic program where for 2 days, managers would go away and they would look at everything from feedback to communication to hiring and recruiting skills. And what they found is that even though managers said they wanted to be trained, they didn't want to then go and attend these programs. They were too busy when they were invited. So they thought, okay, well, rather than jumping to the solution, which is what design thinking aims to do, stop you from jumping to that solution straight away, they said, well, let's use design thinking to explore what's going on for the managers and why might they want to learn, but then don't have the time to learn. And what they discovered through that empathize step is that managers had problems to solve that they saw in the moment. So they need to hire someone for their team and they want to hire the best person and they're not quite sure how to do it. Or they've got to give feedback to someone tomorrow. And again, they're not sure how to do that, but they need to solve it then and there. So what they started to do was prototype and test very small scale solutions of what if we gave the managers some learning at that time of need. So just made it available when they had the problem and use that kind of language. So they started to create videos that managers could access and digital resources. What about a coach or a mentor that the manager could speak to at the time or a 90-minute session? And suddenly by just testing small scale on different problems and making the learning available at that point, that time of need, they saw this huge increase in people accessing learning in general. And suddenly they were kind of impacting managers across the whole organization rather than just the managers that would attend these 2-day programs. And it was all based on the idea of just breaking the problem down, defining it through the user's perspective, and then just starting to iterate on a small scale to begin with, but then sort of build out a whole new approach
But
to
it's a good
learning.
illustration, in fact, also of the learning and the flow of work. Huh?
Yeah, exactly. And I think for me, so many of the topics we've talked about, Tom, in these episodes, design thinking can help you achieve the outcomes that you're wanting. So definitely, learning in the flow of work. The only way you know the problems to solve is to use design thinking to go and discover the needs. Yeah. So, Tom, any examples that you would like to highlight and talk about today?
Yeah, I think what you mentioned about the employee experience, that's important. Huh? So it's very helpful to connect it to the employee journey and then look at the moments that matter. And I've seen results of a project done at the financial institution, the bank. They did all this project. And then it turned out that one of those moments that mattered, you could say, is new, but also existing employees saying, well, I cannot find the information I'm looking for. And then, of course, you could say, well, emphasizing is discussing with the people, what are you looking for and how are you looking and why do you need this information? So understanding what they are doing and where they are looking and how they are looking. But then with the people, they really simplified their intranet. I think that's the old-fashioned term these days.
I think they still use the word intranet, don't worry.
And they changed their intranet. You don't need highbrow IT people to do that. They say, oh, okay, well, let's simplify it and let's make sure that the information most people are looking for is clearly visible on the internet, etc. So that's a super simple example. Another one, it's an older one, but I still like it, is around, again, new employees that say, well, it took ages before I had all my stuff. And existing employees were saying, if my keyboard is broken, or another element, my mouse or whatever or I need a USB stick. This is some time ago. It takes a long time, and so in the outcome of this project was a vending machine. So in the halls of this company, they had vending machines where people with their pass, they could say, my name, I'm Tom, and they could say, and then you could look, what do I need? USB stick, mouse, even a new computers were in that vending machine.
I love it.
Super simple solution, and I liked it a lot. And it was quite fun walking in the corridors, seeing those vending machines on the different floors.
But I really like that because what's been highlighted there is a problem to solve. So this is actually a barrier to people doing work and getting work done. And by solving that problem, you have delighted people, but actually you've also increased productivity and you're getting better results. So it's a great example that if you understand the experience that people are going through and what problems they face, and if you fix that, then you're creating a great solution and you're actually building a great kind of workplace. And so they kind of go hand in hand, don't they? Where I think traditionally HR has focused a lot on that solution up front without doing that exploration first. And I think that's what design thinking really helps us achieve, isn't it?
Yeah, and still many teams are initially, and I see that every day, they are talking to each other. Also in strategy, you could also use design thinking in strategy
Definitely.
formulation.
Yeah.
Instead of sitting with your team together, go out there, empathize, and talk to your managers, talk to the stakeholders, and then work with them in creating a viable and impactful HR strategy.
I've used that for strategy sessions and also topics that are quite complex, like diversity, equity, and inclusion, things like that, because it helps you start to get very practical very quickly. And that's what you really want. One thing I'd like to ask you about, Tom, is that when I work with HR teams with design thinking, I find that it takes them a long time to get used to this experimental kind of mindset. And in particular, this idea of prototyping and testing. So showing unfinished work, showing the mock-up of something on cardboard, before it's pretty and shiny and kind of perfect. What's your thoughts here? How do we help HR understand that this rapid feedback loop, and you mentioned the speed. So this ability to test quickly, validate quickly, and that some things will fail, and that's okay because you haven't invested too much time yet. How do we get HR comfortable with this mindset? What's your thoughts?
In the end, it's about experiencing it. So it's not going to a design thinking course, I think. Start to work on it and maybe hire people like you and say, okay, help us. But it's learning by doing it. And once you are doing it, you are experiencing that it's fun, that your clients like it because people like to be involved. And they think, hey, I've not seen this from HR. Normally, well, they don't ask me anything, and now
Mm,
I'm involved. But maybe also it helps to pull in some other. We earlier talked about multidisciplinary work. Yeah,
mm.
maybe involve people from other groups, other departments, other functions who are experienced in this area. Maybe even from product design, and those people generally are very willing to help and to show how it's done.
Yeah,
I don't know what
definitely.
your tips would be there.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I really like the suggestion of going and partnering with other parts of the business that do this in their day job. I also think that there's an idea of kind of flipping the perspective. So people say, oh, but I want it to be perfect. But what really is perfect? Perfect is that you can demonstrate people are using it and they find it valuable and it helps them get the job done. And you can't know that until you test it. And the more you test, as you're quite right, you realize generally the first test fails quite badly because it's the first time the customer sees something and there's so much that you haven't thought about yet. So it's also getting used to this idea of kind of that iteration back and forth, and that your first idea is often not the solution in the end. You kind of build on that and it gets better and better as you go. Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your discussion today, Tom. And thank you very much for bringing your design thinking step graphic along to show to people. So that's going to be our practical top tip is get used to showing unfinished work in your HR job. And this is about getting comfortable with the experimental mindset and the idea of minimal viable product. So, something that is the smaller solution to begin with that you're just going to test quickly, get feedback on, and understand does this work or does this not? And yes, some elements of your test will most likely fail, but that's exactly what you want because you quickly discover what's the elements of your solution that's going to delight people, what's going to help solve the problem, and which are the bits that just aren't worth working on. And actually, let's just get rid of them now and really focus on what is the most valuable thing to release. Start doing that, and you will be starting to design products and services that people love and will actually use. Thanks so much for joining us today. This is Talking HR Trends with Natal and Tom. If you found this discussion valuable, please subscribe. Have a great day.